What's the most disturbing family tradition you've ever heard of? In my family, every girl was expected to get married at 16 years old and sign a contract that gave her future husband complete ownership of her body, her future children, and her entire life. My grandmother Eleanor was the one who started this twisted tradition back in the 1960s when she married into the Crestmore family fortune. She had clawed her way out of poverty by marrying my grandfather, and she was determined that every woman in our bloodline would secure the same level of financial security regardless of the cost to their humanity. Eleanor had survived the Great Depression by selling everything she owned, including her dignity, and she viewed our bodies as just another commodity to be traded for generational wealth. She had spent decades carefully cultivating relationships with the wealthiest families in our state, and she had already prearranged marriages for daughters who weren't even born yet. The Crestmore women were raised from birth to be perfect wives for men who could elevate our family's social status, and Eleanor had trained my mother and aunts to prepare us for lives of complete submission. My mother had followed this path without question, marrying a man 30 years older than her when she was 17, and she genuinely believed that sacrificing our autonomy was a small price to pay for financial security. She would spend hours teaching me how to walk silently, how to speak only when spoken to, and how to anticipate a man's needs before he even voiced them. When I turned 16, my grandmother sat me down at our dining table and slid a leather portfolio toward me. She explained that I was now engaged to Heath Rothwell, a 42-year-old oil executive who had been waiting 3 years for me to reach legal marrying age. The contract stated that I would bear him at least 4 sons before my 25th birthday, that I would never refuse his physical advances regardless of my health or mental state, and that if I died during childbirth, my family would provide him with my younger sister as a replacement wife. There was nothing I could say. My future was decided, and nobody around me seemed to think this wasn't okay. It was like I was drowning while everyone else acted like water was perfectly breathable. My entire life became about turning me into the perfect bride. My days were filled with etiquette lessons, cooking classes, and medical examinations to ensure my fertility, while Heath would visit our house twice a week to inspect me, his future property. He would walk around me in circles, commenting on my posture, my complexion, and my potential for bearing strong children, and my family would nod approvingly as if they were selling livestock at auction. The breaking point came when Heath grabbed my face during one of his visits and told my grandmother, "I want to break her in properly myself, so she better still have some fight left in her when we marry." I couldn't live knowing that my entire existence had been reduced to a breeding contract for a man old enough to be my father. On the night before my 17th birthday, I packed a single backpack and disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a note that simply read, "Find yourself a new breeding beach." I had saved every dollar from years of babysitting and birthday gifts, and I used that money to buy a bus ticket to a city where nobody knew the Crestmore name. For 6 months, I lived in a women's shelter while working at a diner. It wasn't glamorous, but I was the happiest I'd ever been. The other servers treated me like their little sister, and I laughed and changed the subject whenever anyone asked where I came from. I started to believe that I had actually escaped the nightmare my family had planned for me, but my grandmother refused to accept that I had slipped through her perfectly manicured fingers, and she wasn't about to give up on whatever price Heath was willing to pay for me. She hired private investigators to track me down, and she convinced local police that I was a runaway who needed to be returned to my loving family for my own safety. Eleanor appeared at my workplace with Heath and 2 officers, claiming that I was mentally unstable and needed psychiatric evaluation, and she had forged medical documents stating that I had a history of self-harm and delusional behavior. She told anyone who would listen that I was destroying our family's reputation, and that Heath was graciously willing to take me back despite my rebellious phase. But just when I thought it was hopeless, something amazing happened. Heath destroyed my grandmother's plan by getting arrested for soliciting women's services from an undercover officer who happened to be acting like they were 17 years old. Suddenly, my grandmother's golden boy was facing federal charges that would send him to prison for 20 years. My family had no choice but to release me from the engagement. Eleanor spat on my feet and said she wouldn't make the mistake of trying to marry me off again. Clearly, I was cursed. I was dead to her. I was free. The next day, I got back on the bus and went back to life I'd been building before my grandmother found me. It was bittersweet now, though. I could finally live the life I wanted, but I lost every family connection, every childhood memory, and every sense of belonging I had ever known. Being dead to them was the only way I could truly start living.